old driving fire trucks, right?
Sure doesn't.
You're kind of a kid at heart. You drive a truck.
75 years, that's a lot of history. A lot has changed since the first fire meeting in 1949. Equipment, tactics, concepts, and ideas, and most of all, training. We sat down with current and retired firefighters as well as their families to travel back in time and compare how things have changed. Here are their stories.
Would you start just by first stating your name and what year you joined the fire department?
Brandon Rogers. I joined Gerrish Township Fire Department in October of 2008.
Well, my name is Steve Ament. I joined 1975 and I quit after 30 years. I was a lieutenant safety officer at that time.
Jim Fisher. I joined the Avon Township Fire Department, which is Rochester Hills now, in 1981. And then I moved up here in 1985 and joined this department in 1986.
My name is Jake Figley, and I started here in 1989.
What motivated you to become a firefighter?
That was a long time ago. Yeah. I think we had a family event where it was a tragedy, and the fire department showed up at our house, and I think that's pretty much what got me going on it.
Well, I first started as a firefighter when I lived in the village and was on Higgins Township, and it's just something that I'd been around my whole life. My dad was a firefighter, and I knew that it was something I wanted to do when I became old enough to do it, and so that's how that took place.
After that event, I decided to become an EMT and join the fire department. And that's how it all worked out. That would have been the early 80s.
In 1949, the Gerrish Township Fire Department was formed. They started out with an unused property from the state of Michigan. The property was donated to the fire department for $1. But there was a problem. They needed a building. At that time, there were not a lot of regulations on fire departments, so the members worked together on nights and weekends to build the first fire station. This station is an old block building that remained in service until 2022, when it was turned back over to the state park.
So a lot of history here. This building was built on state property. It was pretty much donated to the township for $1 so that they could build a public safety building on here for the fire department in 1949. The caveat was that if it stopped being used for public safety, it had to be reverted back to the state, which happened a couple of years ago now. We just weren't using the building. It was going to be a maintenance problem, so we basically gave it back to the state. But this fire department, when this building was built, the members built it. That's how things were done back in the day.
As the township grew, so did the fire department. The 1970s and 80s saw the addition of new equipment and more training for firefighters. The department's role became increasingly vital as the population of Gerrish Township expanded.
When the state required all people who were on board an ambulance to be licensed with a first responder license, we had a group in here at that time that didn't want to do that, said screw them. What are they going to do, make us quit? And Gerrish was a leader in bringing training to the north for rural people, because most training was days, and you could get it in Lansing, Detroit, or Marquette, and nobody could afford to do that. We had Wayne McKenna and Joe Hall, Wayne was the director of the Michigan Department of Public Health, and Joe Hall was emergency medical division, And Ralph Walsing, who was our clerk here at one time, but who was our 102nd district rep, or 103rd district rep. We had several meetings with them, and I think we've talked about this before, but we ended up bringing the state, not we, agreed to bring one night a week a team up from Lansing, and we met at the high school. I think it was like for 6 months. It wasn't Thursdays, I believe it might have been Tuesdays or Wednesday, but anyways, we met over there, and we had 12 people in our first training session, and 10 passed. Most of the departments had anywhere between 8 and 12 or 13, and some departments only had 1 pass, 2 pass, but we were really aggressive, and we had a study night before the next class, and it really helped our people. Yeah.
Being a firefighter is a tough job, but it's a lot easier when you know you can count on your partner. You depend on each other to keep each other safe in life or death situations, and that kind of bond is unbreakable. When you go into a burning building, you have to trust that your partner has your back. You know they'll be there to pull you out if something goes wrong, and they know you'll do the same for them.
So you talk about, training and becoming friends. How much did that dynamic of the team play into the ability to kind of do the job?
Oh, I think it's the whole world is to how things go on calls. I think our department here at Gerrish, we spent more time or as much time as any other fire department in the county, and so you're together a lot more than some other departments, and the more you're together, the more when it comes time to do the job, you're working with family members, and you know everybody well enough that you know what to expect of them, and they know what to expect of you, and I think it just makes everything work better on a scene. The more time you spend with each other, and the kind of training that we did, I think we're the best, or one of the best departments that I've ever been around, and it comes from that being together and the training and that kind of thing.
Throughout its history, the fire department has remained deeply connected to the community. Every member of the fire department is not only a firefighter, but they are a mom, dad, son, daughter, aunt, or uncle, friend, and neighbor.
What do you think about your dad being a firefighter?
I think it's cool. It's like he's a superhero. Yeah, he's like the hero that doesn't wear capes.
I think it takes a very big commitment. I mean, there's been times where, the cart's full of groceries at Walmart and the pager goes off and you leave the cart and go to the fire. I've left my family at restaurants and sent my mother to pick them up because it's time to go to the fire. I strive very hard to be a family man and not give up, but my kids, they probably suffered a little without me being there sometimes because I was very dedicated, and I am very dedicated, but in the end they still think I'm their hero. So I think it didn't hurt anything, but it does take a lot of dedication and time, but you save somebody and it's worth every minute.
In my mind, I don't think the kids suffered at all. They spent a lot of time in the fire hall growing up, and they gained a ton of uncles that had their back no matter what.
Yeah, I did realize that not a lot of kids had parents in emergency services in general, right? Whether it was firefighting or police or whatever. And I grew up around the firefighters and the police officers and the EMTs and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I always thought it was different, and I liked it. I thought it was really cool that I knew all these people that were doing all this important work in the community. So, cool.
Well, as a young young wife, you know, I would get very nervous the second his tones would go off. He hadn't even left yet, and I would just be very nervous. And is he gonna come back? And then when you're at home and you hear the radio talking, and he's on the radio saying, "Hey, I'm in the house and there's no water," and you're like, "What? You're in the house and you don't have water?" You know, it's a scary thing. And then you get small children and you're worrying about the kids and is daddy coming home, and then as they get older, then there was chances that I got to get out of the house in the middle of the night to go on the fire and help out as ladies auxiliary with food for the guys, drinks for the guys, just kind of helping out around scene a little bit, keeping them going, keeping their energy up for the battle for the night.
I mean, the structure fires and, you know, even the wildland fires, those make me more nervous. You know, or the nights where he has to go out in bad weather. You know, it is somewhat nerve-wracking. I remember, he wasn't on this department, but I remember the I-75 fire in 2017 maybe, when I-75 caught fire. We live right by I-75. It's all the, you know, it's on the radio, everybody's talking about it, and all I know is they say that they shut off at my exit 244. We're right there, so if that fire jumped, it would get the state land and then my house, and I couldn't get a hold of him. And that was nerve-wracking because I didn't know really what was going on. I didn't know he was on that fire, and so you just worry because they're not readily available. But I think the training that you guys do, and I see it, you guys train weekly, if not daily when you're here, and the team that you guys have makes me feel better. But yeah, it's always nerve-wracking, not with the unknown of where they are and, you know, really who they're dealing with, because some of the medical stuff isn't necessarily just medical. It can be, you know, domestic violence, or it can be, you know, rowdy people, and you don't necessarily know what you're gonna get your hands on.
I'm more emotional and less logical, so I always struggled with it more, but then always knew, you know, there was someone that needed more help than I did. In the middle of the night, I don't notice, because I don't wake up anymore. You get used to it, but yeah.
Entering the new millennium, the Gerrish Township Fire Department continued to evolve. With advancements in technology and firefighting techniques, the department has embraced a new era of emergency response.
So, you know, I guess in my 40 years here, so it's been it's almost 40 years. We've come a long ways with equipment. A lot of the equipment now actually kind of thinks for itself. And back in the day, we had to know more about pump operations and that, and now the truck is kind of smart. Here for you. So this is what's cool now. We have batteries on tools, and these tools used to be hydraulic tools that had to have a hydraulic pump. They're still hydraulic internally, but they used to have a hydraulic pump with hoses, and we couldn't get very far off the road with them because we had to drag the pump with us. We can take this tool now and go just about anywhere and do what we need to do with the jaws, the spreaders, and the cutters, and we can do about anything. Plus the tools work and attached to other tools. The batteries work for other tools, so that's one of the big changes I've seen over the years. Technology like thermal imaging cameras. You know, 40 years ago we didn't have that, and now probably 20 years ago we bought a thermal imaging camera for $14,000 that, you know, was the size of a small suitcase, and now thermal imaging cameras you can hold in your hand like you do your cell phone, and that's amazing technology that we didn't have back in the day. I used to write EMS reports on paper that had 3 or 4 copies, and you have to press hard with the pen so it gets through all the copies. Now you pull it up on a tablet and you write EMS reports, and it automatically gets sent to wherever it has to go. Things like that are just amazing. The trucks are built more efficiently. They're safer when you're driving them. It's just, there's so much stuff out there that we didn't have back in the day. When I first started, we had boots, what we called hip boots, and long coats. We didn't have bunker pants. We didn't have Nomex hoods. First fire I was on was upstairs in a bedroom. When I got to the top of the stairs, my ears were burning because we didn't have Nomex hoods. I could feel the heat on my ear, and the old guys used to tell me, if that's how it feels, then you're probably not where you're supposed to be. Well, now we've got all the equipment we can get into that hot environment and actually do some good. So a lot of that kind of stuff has really changed. So if the average person looks at this, they would have no idea where to start. But once you have a little bit of training in them, the truck is actually smarter than you. This panel here will tell us what the truck's doing. The truck will sense if it's having a problem, and it'll shut itself down before it destroys itself. In the old days, you had to listen to the sound of the pump. You had to understand where the water was going or not going so that you didn't hurt the truck. And now the truck shuts itself down if it's having a problem. You know, it's electronics. It's just a cleaner, easier system to use. But you still have to understand pump operations and that, but the truck is really smart.
I know, were you around in the era of riding on bumpers and?
Yeah, so when I first started in fire, would have been 1980. I was often the second or third one at the station down in Rochester, where I first started on the fire department. I would often get on the back of the truck, put the strap over my shoulder, lean back on the bumper, push the button so the operator knew we could go down the road. So we're hanging on the back of the truck with straps holding us on. We'd pull up our boots, button our coat, make sure our helmet's on while we're going down the road. And you can't do that anymore. So safety-wise, things like that have really changed. Equipment, air packs, you know, the PPE that we wear has significantly changed, as I mentioned earlier. Instead of pulling up boots, we have bunker pants that go over our boots instead of the coats hanging down, those kinds of things. So one of the things that I think is the Gerrish Township should be proud of is that the fire department has been very progressive over the years, trying to stay ahead of the game on the services we provide. So as the 75th anniversary came around, I started looking back in the history of the department all the way back to 1949, and the department has really been progressive. Right around 1970, about the time this station was built, that's when we really got into EMS and transporting patients in ambulances instead of hearses, and training people up to become EMTs. Somewhere around 1980, I think, was our first EMT on the department. And then when I came on in '85, there were about 3 or 4 of us maybe. And then about the mid-90s, we decided to go to advanced life support. And it was a little bit of a struggle with the state and with med control, but they were able to get advanced life support in here. And I think that's served our community well. And I think the vision of our leaders through some of those periods has helped get us there. Leaders within the department, leaders within the township board that supported that and helped us grow to where we are today. And having an advanced life support service that is also a fire service together, I think, is an advantage. You have an EMS crew that's on duty, and they can also fight fire, and I think it serves the community very well. So this subdivision we're turning into here, it's not that old. I'm thinking it's maybe 20 years old, somewhere in that ballpark. The houses in here are newer construction type houses. Probably built in the late 90s, early 2000s at the oldest.
So before this was all non-developed land. There was no houses or anything back here.
Right, this was primarily woods. There might have been an old cabin or something on it, but there's however much acreage is here, probably 40 or 50 acres. It's now got houses on it. Was mostly woods.
How much do you think our community has grown over the last 20 or 30 years?
Oh, I don't know really offhand. I'm thinking we've gained, at an average over those years, 2 or 3% throughout the time. You know, so over 20 years, you're looking at a significant growth.
Has that been reflected in our call volumes?
Oh yeah, for sure. Not just that we have more structures in the community, but we have more visitors, the state park and other things like that, Airbnbs and verbal rentals. You know, so those houses have been there for years, but they aren't occupied very often. Now they're being more occupied more often because the people are renting them out, which brings in more people, which means more medical calls, more emergencies, possibly more fires and rescues. So that's one of the bigger influences over the last few years has been rental homes like that.
Every day, firefighters risk their lives to protect us and our communities. They face life or death situations that most of us can't even imagine.
Probably some of the biggest challenges is learning to deal with the loss, you know, because you, as a young firefighter, I always took it as that I was going to save everything, and sometimes you just can't, you know. Sometimes you go there and you do CPR and it isn't a safe, but yeah, I think that'd probably be the biggest thing to get around.
I started the academy in 97, 98, and then got on the city of Adrian in 2000. So since then, a memorable time. I think one of the most memorable times would be one morning in Adrian. I was doing chores, and honestly I was a little miffed because nobody was helping me. I was all alone, and after about 20 minutes of mopping the floors, I went looking for the rest of the crew, and they were in the day room huddled around the TV, very quiet, and the Twin Towers were so.
What was that experience like, being in the fire service during that time, knowing kind of what was happening?
Well, wow, it's weird. That's really got dark. But yeah, it was different. So we had a lot of rules come down about safety and security. We had to start locking the trucks when we went to the grocery store. We had to start closing the bays. And prior to that, we'd always put them on the aprons and had them out in the sun, and we'd wash them out there. So that was different. Actually the next year we went to a scaffolding collapse class down in Indiana, and the guys running it were FDNY, and they were, I think, Rescue 1, and they said, we're here because Rescue 3 was all killed last year. They were supposed to be running this class. And so they were able to talk about it through the whole, it was a couple of day class, and it was interesting to hear really their side of everything that happened that day.
Altogether, I was here 57 years. So, try to pick out one thing. I've seen some horrible things, and deaths and things like that. But those aren't memorable, or you'd like not to remember them anyways. But we've had some good saves of people, and still doing it today.
You know, just how proud you are of him and his friends, his family here, of what they do. Yeah, it's not always about saving the house, but when he comes home and says, I was able to get the pictures off the walls, I was able to get the photo album off of the coffee table, and then when he brings it out of this burning house and hands it to a wife or husband or somebody of all their memories that could have been up in smoke along with the house, and that just brings them to tears knowing that they would think about those small things, which to maybe us it would be small, but to them it's huge. I lost my house, but I still have all my memories that I can never get back.
During our conversation, the department members talked about their experiences on the job. It was an eye-opening conversation. There were definitely some negative experiences mentioned, but what stuck out to me the most was that every single firefighter I talked to had more positive experiences than negative. They talked about the camaraderie and the feeling that they were part of something bigger than themselves. They talked about the rush they got from helping people in their time of need, and they talked about the satisfaction they felt when they knew they had made a difference. Despite the challenges and dangers, it's clear that these firefighters love what they do.
You know, your friendships that you make within the fire department, like you said, they're like a second family, and so there's a lot of closeness and a lot of you know, you see each other and do things with each other away from the actual fire department.
I remember when we first put our chicken barbecue out there, it got so hot it burned through the phone line. I don't know if you remember that. They buried the phone cable coming in here and it burned through it. The heat went down.
Yep. Because they build that fire right off the ground like that. So do those.
Harold and his two boys.
Yep.
Callis.
Yep.
Jim Callis.
Yep. There's Red.
You know, we've always had a Christmas party, have dinner and have a get together and, you know, have games, and kids are invited, and that's always been a important get together for me. For quite a few years now I've been playing Santa, and it's, you know, now I'm seeing kids that they have their own kids that they're bringing to the Christmas party. And then we always had summer parties, you know, family parties, you know, appreciation to our families because they have to make some sacrifices too. So you know, we get together and play volleyball and softball or whatever, and some firefighter games and that kind of thing. And that's part of what is my best memories of belonging to the fire department, were those kind of gatherings, and everybody always has a good time during those get-togethers.
Well, this looks like it probably was one of the parties we had. There's my wife. That's you there.
Yeah, it looks like, yeah, it looks like.
I don't know who that is. Here's Terry and Rosie.
Yep.
Who's this here?
Not late enough for me to see. There's Harold and Boyd.
Those must be the boys there, huh? Remember, he used to bring them to fires and make them sit in the car because he didn't anybody watch his kids.
One night we came out after meeting, and the white knight was in the road across the street, in the swamp across the street. Somebody forgot to lock the brakes or something, shut it off and left it in gear. We had to get it out of there. That wasn't a practical joke. It's kind of funny when you think about it, into the swamp. Rolled across the road, I don't know how come somebody didn't hit it.
The fire service is in desperate need of new volunteers. In recent years, there has been a sharp decline in the number of people willing to serve their communities in this way.
That's one of our more difficult issues is recruitment and retention. We're seeing a bunch of the older firefighters moving on, retiring, and we have very few younger folks coming in. And then our community in particular is the demographics in our community leans towards the 50, 60, 70-year-old age group. And so it's difficult for us to recruit young folks into the fire and EMS service. So that's a challenge for us, and it's not just for us, it's a national challenge as well. And so working with the National Volunteer Fire Council, the National Fire Protection Association, they're all working towards recruitment programs and retention programs that we're grabbing onto and trying to use. But it's a challenge. And I think it's not just a challenge for the fire service, but it's a challenge for all the volunteer organizations in the world, basically. It's hard to get people to step up to be coaches, to be referees, to manage programs for kids, to be involved with community service projects. We find volunteerism has really declined over the last few years, and I expect it's going to continue that way for a few years. And plus the baby boomers are now the old folks, right? And I'm one of them. And we're going to see those folks dropping off of that list of volunteers, and who's going to step up and do that.
What do you think one of the biggest contributing factors to the reduced volunteerism, in your opinion, is?
I think that there's more demands on people's time. I think that when I first started, you didn't have to have both the parents working like they do now. My wife was able to stay home with the kids and do daycare at home. I was very fortunate that way, so it allowed me to be more engaged in the department. You don't have much of that anymore. Now both parents are working, they're coming home taking care of kids. It's very difficult for them to commit to other activities such as fire and EMS or supporting things in the community. And that's understandable. In order to buy a house these days, you have to have two incomes. Back when I bought my house, I was able to do that on my income, and that doesn't happen now.
Do you think that's going to push the fire service towards more of a full-time career type department?
Yeah, I believe that because of that, the departments have to they're either going to fade away, which is not good, because then other fire departments are going to have to cover that area with longer response times, or they're going to have to gradually move towards part-time and full-time staff. Even in some of the rural areas, there's just not much choice. If we want to have an adequate response, we're going to have to put people on duty, and it's going to have to supplement their income enough that they make a good living out of it.
What advice would you have for any aspiring firefighters?
Have lots of time to train, because there's more now than even when I was new at it. It was a lot then, but from what I understand, and of course I've been out since 2006, so a lot's gone on since that.
I think for a young person coming into the fire service, my best advice would be to attach yourself to a firefighter on that department and learn everything you can learn from them before you get into the situation. Take all the training that is available to you. Anything they'll give you, take it and learn from it, and be ready to build a new family in a really good team. I think becoming a firefighter allowed me to become a man and to understand the importance of working hard and being there for your community. I believe that it takes a very strong person to be able to do what we do, man or woman, to be ready at a moment's notice. I think it may be a good person.
Over the last 75 years, the Gerrish Township Fire Department has changed a lot. However, there is one thing that hasn't changed: the hard work, determination, heart, and soul that the members of this department put into serving our community. The firefighters in Gerrish Township are proud to carry on the tradition of service that began in 1949. Back then, a small group of dedicated volunteers built the first fire station with their own hands. Today, Our department has grown and evolved, but our commitment to our community remains the same.
So I came on this department in 1986. That'd be 38 years ago now. And I came from a department downstate that I was on for about 5 years. And when I came up here, I asked people that I knew that lived up here, what fire department should I be on? And they said, hands down, Gerrish Township. And the reason they said that is because it is a progressive township. Not just the fire department, but the township in general. But the fire department's been really progressive. The people on the department try to be professional, try to be well educated, they train often, they're fairly dedicated, even as volunteers, they're fairly dedicated to really being good at what they do. They really care about their community, and they take care of each other. And so since joining this department, it's been like my second family. And I've been lucky in my career to have this plus my full-time career and have the same experience there. I wouldn't trade the experience we've had here at Gerrish and the people that I've been able to work with than anything else. I wouldn't trade it for anything. And it's been very good. And I really appreciate the people that I've had over the years and the people that I'm working with now. And I don't know how to say that any better than this is where I would like to be. You know, if something happens to me or my family, this is the department I want coming.